Good evening, everybody. So this is the brew video that I promised everybody. It didn't go completely without a hitch. I ran out of memory towards the end. I caught what I could. I didn't catch everything I wanted to, but it covered most of the areas. It gives you a good basic idea of my process. It's a long process. It was probably about a 6-hour brew day. It'll get easier when I have a better system put together. It's still, I got all my vessels, but kind of getting everything to transfer right is kind of a cobble. But all in all, it was a good day. It's a productive day. I hope you enjoy it. Certainly leave comments or any questions that you may have. Go ahead and leave those down at the bottom. Have a good night. That all starts. Got all the equipment out and laid out. Right. Got a bucket that's going to have cleaner in it and sanitizer. That in the middle there is my carboy. That's going to be where it all ferments. That there is my boil kettle. It's made out of a keg. And then I've got my mash tun, which is where I'll mash my grains. And then I've got a hot liquor tank up there. And then this will just heat up my strike water. So I got 3 gallons of water in there. I'm going to heat it up to about 169 degrees. And then I'm going to put it in here. This is my mash tun. All it is a 10-gallon water cooler storage thing that I've modified. Take a look down there. I've got a valve, ball valve down there. And on the inside here, I've got a false bottom that'll keep the grains from going through when I start emptying this out. Now what happens in here is that hot water activates certain enzymes in the grains, and those enzymes start breaking up the complex sugars in the grains, breaks them down to simpler sugars. The yeast can then take those simple sugars, break them down into alcohol. It eats the sugars and it expels alcohol and carbon dioxide. So now the excitement begins when I light my burner. Turn the propane on. You can hear it firing away. And then light it up. And off we go. And now we wait for it to heat up to 169. So I slightly overshot my temp. It's looking like it's coming down. I let it cool off. And it went down a little too low, but that's okay. Double check it with this guy. We're getting 160. And he's saying it's about 170. This guy's saying it's about 174, 171 now. This stupid thermometer, it bounces around a lot, as you can see. I'm gonna call that good though. Gonna go ahead and dump this into the mash tun, dump in the grains, and get to mashing. All you do there is just let it sit. I'll let it sit for an hour before I drain the liquid off of here and rinse the grains using more water, and it'll all end up in there. And then we get to boiling, and that's where all the good smells come. Trying to do this one-handed, so bear with me, but now we've got all the grains in there. Got to stir it up, right? And you want to get rid of any clumps. You don't want any clumps in there. You want to keep it and mix it all up. Break up any of the chunks like that. You don't want any of those. You want to get rid of all of those. It's called doughing in. And dough in, break up any of the chunks, make sure everything is smooth, like a good smooth, kind of almost too much water in oatmeal, you know. It's a little bit on the soupy side. That's what we want. Of course, I've got it all figured out. There's all kinds of apps and computer programs that'll tell you the exact ratio of how much water to add to your particular grain bill, depending on how many pounds of grains you got. And this is looking pretty good. So we've got that doughed in. Now ideally you'd be checking the temperature on this stuff, but the fact is where the temperature is where my temperature is going to be, so it doesn't matter really. If I undershot it, if I overshot it, well, it's too late now because the water's in there, it's all mixed up. On my new system, when I finally build it, I'll be able to make fine adjustments to it. That's what those three guys there are for. It'll be a Herm system, and when I build that, I'll show that and record it and probably post it up too. Well, I'm going to get the lid on this, and we'll see you on the next step. 15 minutes. You got to come over here and stir this stuff up. Oh man, it's already smelling really good too. Sweet and malty and roasty and just scrumptious. But we stir it up so that we can get the heat even. Make sure that the heat stays evenly distributed in that grain bed. We want to keep it at temp as much as possible, and we want it to keep it at temp as evenly as possible through the whole process while it's mashing, while it's breaking down those saccharides. Alright, so now it's about halfway through the mashing phase. Alright, so it's about half an hour left of mashing in here, and now I'm heating up my sparge water. Now what sparging does is it rinses the sugars off of the grains, because we're going to drain the water out of here into our boil kettle. And at the same time, we're going to be adding this water that I'm going to heat up to 170 degrees. It's about 5 gallons, and it will be going into that. That's my hot liquor tank. It's a 5-gallon water jug that put a ball lock or a ball valve on, and so it'll go from there. It'll stream into the top of the grain bed in here, while at the same time the wort, which is the unfermented beer, will be coming out of there and dumping into the boil kettle. Once that whole process is done and we've boiled off, during the boil we'll add hops, and then we'll take it from here, cool it down. I've got a special cooler that I'll show you when we get there, but it cools it down. We'll put it in that. That's my carboy that I'll be getting all washed up in a little bit here. We'll wash it and sanitize it. Extremely, extremely important. After you boil it, everything that beer touches has got to be super clean and as sanitized as you possibly can get it. If you don't sanitize it, you run the risk of infecting it with bacteria that'll make it go sour and make it taste gross. So you gotta keep things as clean as possible on this side, but once we boil it, things have to be sanitized clean. So I'll be back in a little bit, and we'll get to boiling it. Once we start boiling the wort in there, I'll start cleaning, and then and there we go. All right. So we're all done mashing now. I've got my sparge water up there, and it's gonna come down into there, rinse out the grains, which are going to go down in here. Now, the first step, before we do that, we do a step called vorlofting, which means I'm going to pull some of the liquid off of here, and it's going to be a good bit of grains mixed in there, and we want to let it settle. I'm going to keep the camera down here. We want to let it set, that grain bed to settle, and we want the grains to stop coming through. So if you look in there, you can see chunks of grain in there. We don't want those. So we're going to fill this up, we're going to dump it all back in there, and we're going to keep doing that until this runs clear. Once this runs clear, we can start the sparging process. Now you can see, alright, now you can see we don't have all those grains in there anymore. And you can look in the hose and see that hose is running pretty dang clear, and that's what we want. So that's the end of vorlofting, and we can start the sparge. Alright, I've started the sparge water coming in here. I want to get probably about an inch of water above this grain bed before I start draining it from this mash tun. So I've got the water coming from this vessel here out through the tube and down in there, and it's just gently coming out. Now that's something important to note. This is not a speedy process. We're not trying to do this quickly. We want to do it nice and slow for a couple of reasons. For one, we want to make sure to get all the sugars washed off of that grain, just as much sugar as we can. We want to get them washed off and into our boil kettle. Now also, if we drain this too quickly, what will happen is that grain bed will suck down onto the false bottom, and it'll stop draining. It'll clog up that false bottom, and the water won't drain out if it's coming out too fast. We don't want that. We want it to continuously flow. If you get a stuck sparge, that's what they call it when it quits draining out. If you do end up with a stuck sparge, it's a real pain in the butt to get it to go right again. So it's better to just not bother with it. Here it is draining into the boil kettle. Once again, nice and slow. We're not in a rush here. We're just trying to wash those grains out and get all that liquid and all the sugars we can down in here. That's all we're doing. So this is going to be a long, slow, drawn-out process, and that's okay. Good beer is meant to have the time taken to make it good beer. Okay, so we are done sparging. I got just a hair over 6 gallons, which is what I want. We're probably going to lose about a gallon during the boil, so that'll put me just a little bit above 5 gallons. That'll go into the fermenter, and that's fantastic. It's a nice looking wort there, good and dark. This line is just finishing up draining, and we should be good to go. So we've gotten all the starches and all the sugars washed off and tightened up. Now I took a reading of the specific gravity, which is just a measurement of how much sugar is in solution, and I used this handy little thing. Super cool tool, and it tells me that we're at about 1.045 specific gravity, and for this particular beer we want it to be at about 1.049, but we're going to lose a lot of water. Like I say, about a gallon of water is going to come off of here when we boil it, so I think we're going to be a-okay and right where we want to be. Alright, well, you can hear that burner going. It's going hard and going hot. We're trying to get this to boil. You can see it's starting to kind of foam up a little. It'll get a good thick head of foam on there. We call that a hot break, and it's proteins that are coming out of the wort and coming up to the surface. Eventually, that foam will cover the whole surface on top, and then all of a sudden it'll just fall into the liquid again, and it'll start boiling really good. Once it starts boiling really good, we'll start the timer, and we'll put our first hop addition. Now in this recipe I've got 3 hop additions. I've got a 1/2 ounce of Chinook that I put in right away, that's the bittering. And then I've got a 1/2 ounce of Fuggles and another 1/2 ounce of Fuggles that I'll put at different times in there. And they provide aroma and flavor, but not so much the bittering. The only one that'll really provide much bittering is the Chinook right there. Grains. They actually make fantastic compost, but my chickens just go crazy for them. I'll put that whole 7 to 10 pound pile down there, and they will just so don't waste your grains. Don't throw them in the trash. Compost them, feed them to chickens. If you know a gardener, give it to them to compost. But there's no need to waste. All right, so now we got a good boil going. So a trick I learned, we're going to toss in the first addition of hops. Now the trick I learned is to turn off the heat before you add the hops. If you don't, what will happen is this will foam up real bad, and you run the risk of having a spillover, and that's sad because that's a lot of beer. So first addition, the Chinook, 1/2 ounce, toss it in there, I toss it directly, and you can see how it just kind of starts bubbling up. I think it's because of the cold hitting the hot. And then we'll fire this thing back up, bring it to a boil again, and we'll start the timer. While that's boiling here in my kitchen, I'm getting ready to start cleaning. So I've got a bucket with 5 gallons of water in it, along with the lines I was using and the airlock. And to that, I'm going to add this powdered stuff here. Now this is 3.5 ounces of, you can use powdered brewery wash, PBW. You can get it at your local home brew store. However, I use a mixture of OxyClean and TSP 90. It's essentially the same chemicals, and this stuff cleans things off really well, especially organic matter. So I'm going to dump that into the 5 gallons of water. It's hot water too. And then we'll get it stirred up and mixed in, and then we'll start washing. Now this bucket has a spigot on it so that I can take the water here and run it through my coolant, my cooling coils that I'm going to use to cool the beer. Now those things are kind of hard to clean out, which is why I use the PBW to clean it out, because it's about a 25-foot copper coil that you're trying to clean out. Obviously it's hard to stick a brush through a coil. So you send this through. I'll probably send it twice. I'll send it from here through the coil into my fermenter, and then from my fermenter through the coil back into this bucket. And then this, actually, I will dump down our shower drains because of the chemical, because of the PBW, it will eat away at all the organic material that's stuck in the drain. Alright, so well, my phone ran out of memory in the middle of the last take, but here's the wort. It's all heated up, been done boiled, and now it's going down the tube, through the cooler, coming out, and ending up in my fermentation chamber. You can see in there it's 72 degrees. And I tell you, it's not 72 degrees up here. Can't see it real well, but there's condensation on that line. And it's warm to the touch. And now it's all filled in there. And so now I just got to pitch the yeast. And then in a few hours, probably tomorrow morning, it'll be bubbling away as the yeast does its job. Using this yeast right here, all ready to go.